So in today's class, uh, we will be looking mostly into the database concepts like JDBC. Okay, so let's not worry about JDBC first. Like the database concepts, where we will try to see what is the requirement for a database or why we need a database for a specific system and all. So to keep things simple, let me start by explaining a little bit of a little history about this. So let us assume that today we are trying to create an application for Bank of America and Chase. Okay. So if those two applications are available for the users to register themselves and log in and check their information. So as a user, when I log in and see or do some transactions and all, and after a while, after a day or two or after some time, if I try to log in back and want to see my transactions or see my account details and all, there should be something which must store all the information related to the users who has logged in, registered, did some transactions, or basically it's like you need to store the users data, right? And the user actions, everything needs to be stored. So at any point of time, the data persistence is nothing but storing. The data storing is very important. Now when I say the data persistence is important, what exactly is data persistence and how do you do that? So data persistence is required because you can store some information. If you're having a website like Bank of America, you need to store all the user transactions, user details, user data, user address, everything, so that you can retrieve it at a later point of time. Okay, you can retrieve it at later point of time. Now whenever we think of these databases, there are two concepts here. One is like in-memory databases and the other one is like a physical databases where we try to store the data at some location. So the first concept is like when I say in-memory database, let us assume that your application is running on a machine and you have allocated 2 GB of RAM for running your application. If that is the case, then if you're trying to create an in-memory database, it means in whatever memory you allocate for running Java on your RAM itself, it creates or it allocates some allocation space where you can store the data. Okay, so whenever you want to store the data, all the user data, user profiles, address, everything for the users who are logging into Bank of America or Chase Bank, you you cannot store all this information in the memory. Why? Because it consumes all the memory, and the memory like 2 GB, 3 GB, it will not be sufficient to store huge amounts of data. So the concept of in-memory database at present is ruled out. Means at present means in this current context of the application which we are going to see is ruled out. So in general, like whenever we start learning how to code for a database, or if we want to create some simple databases, instead of installing all these MySQL or anything, Oracle or anything, you can go with in-memory databases and you can learn how to code for those database and all those things. But that is mostly only for your learning purpose. In real time, we use like a real physical databases. Now when I say a database is something which can store the data, the first question that might come to your mind is how can the data be stored? Okay, so we are trying to learn some concepts of database, which is used for database is used for data storage or data persistence. Now in this database, when I'm trying to store some data, let me start with the basic and fundamental basic concepts. Let us assume that I do have a flat file, like a simple file where I can store my data and I can retrieve the data. So if suppose if I want to store the data in this notepad, So I say like I store the username, user details as one Raghu and password as secret, something like that. Two Naveen, password as top secret, something like this. So in this scenario, what happens is every time you store some information in a file, ideally this data can be read by anyone. Okay, anyone can read this information if they have access to this file, or if this file is present in any specific folder, they can always go back and read that information, right? And also if by mistake, if they delete the file or if they delete the folder in which the file is present, there will be a huge loss of data that is going to happen, right? So trying to store data in this scenario, or trying to store the data in this way, is not a preferred way of doing. And also in real time we will have huge amounts of data, okay, to be stored and to retrieve and to update and all those things. So going through or searching for data in flat files is more tedious or time consuming, right? So there are certain scenarios where we don't prefer to store data in these kind of systems. Rather, we opt for something called as database. Okay. So now when I say database, there are very famous databases out there in the market. Something called as Oracle is something which you might have heard of, DB2 from IBM, and then MySQL. MySQL initially was an independent company, but later it was bought by Oracle. So Oracle, DB2, MySQL, then Postgres SQL, then you have like H2DB. This is like a in-memory database. Then there are a lot of things like Postgres, Cassandra. It is one kind of DB. Then MongoDB, that is one kind of DB. So there are different databases out there which can store data. Now, the first thing that comes to our mind is like how exactly data is being stored here. Okay, so there are two scenarios here, team. One, something like Oracle, DB2, MySQL, PostgreSQL, H2DB and all. The other scenario is like Cassandra or MongoDB or some other kind of DBs. So the first set of databases that I told use something called as a schema. So when I say a schema, it is something like a structure. Okay, schema is nothing but a structure in which you define saying that, hey, in the user table, I want to store user ID, username, and password. So I am defining a structure for the user table, right? So this is how data is stored with respect to a schema. And when we use a schema, where exactly or how exactly we store the data? So we store the data in the form of rows and columns in a table. Okay, so data will be stored in the form of rows and columns in a table. Now, when I say rows and columns and in a table, the next thing that we need to understand here is each row that I define. So I will show an example of a database, a simple example. Let me open it. In which, like, if you see this specific row, one Raghu secret, that is nothing but one specific record, and two Naveen top secret, this is again a different record. So in this scenario, when I say rows and columns, each row defines a specific set of data, and each column, so this is a column, 1 2 is a column. Just hold on. See, just a second. So this is a database. I will explain all these scenarios. I'll show you some examples and I will explain. So once you install database, maybe you can see the same view and can get some data out of it. So this is a schema in which I do have a table, and in the table I do have a user table. So if I select rows from the user table, you can see that the data is being displayed in the form of rows and columns. So the highlighted part is a row, which is nothing but a specific record, and the user ID 1, 2, this is nothing but a column. Okay, this is the column. User password is a column. Like that, we do have rows and columns in a table. That is how the data will be stored in the database. Now, the next thing, we understood that we are trying to store data in rows and columns in a database like Oracle DB2 and MySQL or something, right? Now, why exactly, or what is the specific advantage that you get by storing the data in a database when compared to storing the data in a flat file, okay, like what we saw in the previous scenario? So the advantage is all the databases, like whatever we discussed above, they are all kind of software systems where they know how to manage the data. So when I say they know how to manage the data, it means like they have a lot of inbuilt functionalities defined for us. The first thing, or the simplest thing that I can say here is, let us assume that I'm trying to store data for user records in a flat file. Okay, in a flat file. So I say one Raghu secret, two Naveen top secret. And now if suppose a next user tries to come and register, and when I try to insert a data by mistake, okay, by mistake, if I try to insert the data as one, and I say Sriram and new secret. So if I do this, the flat file will never complain. It will start storing the data. But if you notice here, all I want to do is, if suppose if my requirement is I want to make this first column or the ID column as unique, which means it is not repeated. Okay. So in that scenario, in a flat file, it can never complain. Okay. Why? Because it will not compare with other stuff. But if you take the same scenario with respect to table, okay, let me say that I say here one, and I say here Sriram new secret. I add the data, say apply. It is firing some query. We'll understand this later. And I say apply. So did you notice here when I try to add some data, it is showing some error here. There was an error while applying the SQL script to the database. What is that error? It shows duplicate entry 1 for the key primary. Okay, so let me cancel this since it is not a valid scenario. So the basic concept here is, when I try to enter some data, I can add some restrictions or some constraints on top of the data so that I can insert a valid set of records into the database. So in this scenario, let us understand two important terms with respect to database: primary key, foreign key. Okay, so primary key and foreign key is one thing that we try to understand. And apart from this, let me add few more scenarios. So let us assume that there is a huge data that you want to check search on and try to pull some results. Okay, so you have some thousands of records. Now you write a query saying that, hey, give me all the users who are present in or who are staying in Dallas. If that is the query that you are running on your database which has thousands of records, in general it might take some time. If you do the same thing on a flat file also, it can take a while. Now, if you go to a database, what you can do is you can create something called as an index. Okay, you can create something called as an index on the column called city, which means, so what is the basic use of an index? Index helps us in grouping things, and it will tell like where exactly, or it is a kind of a shortcut that you can understand in a textbook for going to a specific page, right? It can directly point you that, hey, go to this page for this chapter 5, chapter 6, or something like that. The same way, if you create an index in the current scenario I'm talking about, if you can create an index on a city column, then when we are trying to retrieve data based on the city column, the index can help us in faster retrieval of the data, so that at any point of time you can make a faster output, or you can retrieve data at a faster pace when compared to the data search on a flat file, which will never have an index on it. Okay, so this is again one of the advantages. And now the other thing which you can say is like, you can grant some permissions, like in a flat file you might not be able to grant permissions on any table saying that, hey, user cannot delete this data, or user cannot modify this data. But on a database you can modify the data, you can add restrictions, you can say that, hey, user can only view this, user can modify this, but you cannot delete this. Like that, you can add different sets of constraints on top of the data and on the tables. Okay, so there are a lot of advantages, all these things. So all these uh, constraints or all these advantages that we get from the databases help us to make sure that the data can be stored securely, safely. We can always take some backups of the data, and also can maintain the data so that we can retrieve the data at any point of time in the future. Okay, so data persistence and data retrieval is the most important thing in an application perspective. Why? Because it's not just the front end of the application which you need to code. You always need to take care of what exactly is happening in the back end means in the database side, how the data is being stored, retrieved, all these things needs to be understood. Okay, now the next thing that we will see here is, let's understand a primary. Okay, I will do one thing. I will explain this primary key and foreign key concept. When I just try to add some data or remove some data from the database and all, then I will try to explain the scenario. But to give a basic heads up of what is the primary key and the foreign key, primary key is first scenario. When I say a primary key, it need not be an ID only. It can be anything, a username, it can be a username, it can be password, or means maybe to be precise, I'm saying that it need not be an ID only, like 1 2 3. It can be any string, it can be anything. Okay, but how do you identify exactly? That's good. Yeah, so the next thing is, but how do you identify in a table which column needs to be made as a primary key? The concept here is, let's take a simple scenario of our user table. In our user table, let us assume that this is a login table where the users will store their login ID and password in this table. So can anyone tell me what column I can make as a primary key? What is the column that I can use as a primary key? User ID, username, okay, user ID, okay, what else? Okay, so let me put it this way. The basic scenario is, it all depends on the requirement and the uniqueness if you observe. So if I say like, hey, I want to create a mail application where people can log in, or if I want to create or if I try to give an application where users can register themselves and log in, I will always make sure that the login ID must be unique. Either it's the name or a phone number I give or anything. See, in my application, if I say that, hey, users can log in through their phone numbers, then I want to make sure that there are phone numbers which are unique in my system. Means I cannot duplicate an entry for that, or If I say like I want to make sure that the users must have a unique name for logging in. So I will log in with the name as Raghu. Someone else will log in with the name as Naveen. But I cannot make two people log in with the same name as Raghu and Raghu, right? So it means that in my system, username can be a primary key. Primary key is something which must be unique in a table. Unique means it must not be repeated. So when I say it cannot be repeated, it cannot be repeated in the same column. Okay. So I can have username as Raghu and password as secret. Someone else like Naveen can have username as Naveen and can have the password as Raghu. Okay. So when I say I'm making sure that the username column is unique, it means none of the values in this username column must be repeated. So now what is the advantage of using a primary key? Using a primary key, you can uniquely identify a record in a table. A simple example that I can say is, suppose you're going to a college and you're registering yourself, you will get a unique ID like a roll number. So the roll numbers in a college might be like something like batch number, then the year, then maybe some course followed by some unique number like ABC 2015 0x05 might be your number. So I can say that when I'm making or creating a college database, I can create the user ID or maybe the user roll number as a primary key in a table where I want to store the user records. So if five people are trying to join, all the five people will have different user IDs or roll numbers, and they might have the same name or different name. Why? Because there might be two people with the same name as Naveen and Naveen, right? So the name ideally cannot be unique or it cannot be a primary key column in that student table. I need to make the roll number of the user as the primary key column. So using the primary key column, you can uniquely identify a table, you can uniquely identify a record in a table. Okay. So now in my system, in my DB, did you notice here when I say one Sriram new secret, it told that hey, there is a primary key violation that you are doing. So what happens is I made user ID as a primary key column. So when I try to insert the same old key again, saying that it is 1, it throws a constraint violation. Instead of 1, if I make it as 3, and if I say apply, see, it has executed successfully. Okay. Finish. Now if I go back and execute my query, it will see it will show 3 records in my database. Okay. So a primary key is something which can uniquely identify a record in a table. Okay. So the next thing, that the foreign key, I will explain you with an example when it comes, like when I try to show you some examples like two different tables, one dependent on the other, then I will show you the concept of foreign key. Okay. Now, so we basically understood like what exactly is the data persistence and why we need to do a data persistence and what are the advantages that we get using data persistence. Okay. Now the next scenario that we are trying to will be going to understand here is how to write a simple uh, program which can connect the Java application to the backend database, so that from the Java application we will be able to talk to the database, store some data, retrieve some data, and all those things. So the basic scenario would be, or the basic criteria would be, once we establish a connection to the database from the Java application, we will try to perform these operations, CRUD operations. So CRUD operations, they stand for, C stands for create, R stands for read, U stands for update, D stands for delete. So my CRUD operations, we are create, update, oh sorry, create read update delete. Okay, create read update delete, these are the basic set of functionalities that we will be doing with a database on that specific data. Okay, so the first thing first, let's try to see how we can connect to the database. So this is the database that I have already installed. So like Eclipse, what is Eclipse? Eclipse is an IDE, integrated development environment. So Eclipse is an IDE used for connecting to the database. uh, sorry, Eclipse is an IDE just for coding, like when we want to write a code and all, we use that IDE so that it can give some functionality. The same way, once we install MySQL server, okay, which is nothing but a database server, to talk to the database server we will have an interface. So the interface is nothing but MySQL workbench. This is the interface, so we will try to install this interface so that we can get, or we can see, means this is all like a graphical user interface for the database or the data that we are trying to store in MySQL server. Okay, so the first thing is how to connect to this database and try to do the CRUD operations from the Java program is what our aim is to understand today. Okay, so I'll just create a simple Java project. So file Java project. Then I'm going to create something called as JDBC. So here, first things first. When I say this project name as JDBC, there is some meaning why I wrote that. In general, whenever I am trying to connect to the database from a Java program, we will be using certain predefined set of classes by the Java called as JDBC, means it is an API, application programming interface, which is nothing but a set of classes and interfaces which are given to us for connecting to the database. Okay, so we will be using those predefined classes. Okay, now they are all present in something called as java.sql package. So we will use those classes in those package and try to connect to the database. Now the most important thing here, so what I will do here is I need a jar file for connecting to the database. So what I will do is, let me search for. So MVN repository is a kind of a location where you can all go back and search for any jars that you want to download. You can always go to Google, search for those jars and download. If not, you can download it from this website also. Okay. So here we want to first download a jar, or we need a jar called MySQL jar. Okay, MySQL connector jar 5.1.36. Click on that. Say download the jar. So I cannot send these jars ideally over the network. Uh, I don't know why, but recently like Gmail stopped blocking, started blocking all these jar files. So I want every one of you to take that website, go back and search for something called as MySQL from your machine, and click on that search. Once you click on that, you will be able to see MySQL connector Java. Click on that link, and then click on this most recent link like 5.1.36. This is the version of the jar that we want to download. So click on that one and click on download jar. Okay, it will download a jar file for you. So what I will do, I'll place this jar file somewhere. I need not rename anything. Just showing an additional version and all. I just deleted it. Okay. So MySQL connector jar, this one. Yeah, that's what I will explain that, Krishna. So Krishna was asking a question like, if we are using an Oracle jar, do we need to Oracle? Do we need to use a different jar? Yeah, I'm going to explain that. So the first thing, why exactly we downloaded a jar called this MySQL jar? The basic concept here is, if suppose if my Java application wants to talk to a MySQL server, then we need to use a jar. A jar is nothing but a collection of library, a collection of classes and interfaces. So using those classes, we know like how to interpret an incoming uh, request from a Java to be converted into something which the database can understand. So let us assume that in future, okay, in future you will be, let us assume that you will create a database called ABC database, okay, and release it to the market. So once you create a database called ABC database and release it to the market, you need to tell all the users that, hey, if you want to use ABC database, you need to download some connector jar like ABC hyphen connector hyphen Java and version number. So what it does is it tries to connect or any commands that is coming from the Java. This jar can interpret and can convert it into something which the ABC database can understand. So right now we are using MySQL. So this is a jar file which is given by MySQL itself. Okay. They told, the MySQL people told that, hey, if you want to connect to MySQL database, use a connector jar for connecting Java and MySQL. If you are using an Oracle, all you need to do is you need to download a jar. It says Oracle hyphen connector hyphen Java, something like that. So if you are using a Postgres database, you need to use a different jar which can understand all the incoming Java requests, or basically that will help us in uh, converting all the Java requests into something which the underlying database can understand. So since we are talking to MySQL, we need this jar, MySQL connector jar. Okay. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do here is, very most important thing. What I want you to do is, I want every one of you to understand that the current project, whatever I have created, does not have the capabilities to talk to the database. Does it have a capability to talk to the database? It did not. It will not have. So what I will do is, I will add the capabilities. So I will right click on the project. Understand very closely what I'm doing here. I'll right click on the project. I'm going to build path. Okay, I'm going to build path and I'll say configure build path. Either I can do the same thing, or I can go to the last option called properties, and in that properties I can go to the build path. Anything I can do, but this is, you'll go directly there. So say configure build path, and here go to the second tab called libraries. Click on the tab libraries, and here you need to tell that, hey, use an additional jar called MySQL jar if you want to talk to the database. So adding the jar to our project will give our project the capabilities to talk to the database. So adding the jar is the most important thing. Is it clear to everyone? Okay, so this is the location where my jar is present. So what I will do is, I will say add external jars. So see here, I want to add a jar which is present somewhere in C drive or D drive something. So I say add external jars. So now see here, I'm going to select this MySQL connector Java jar. Okay. So now in the class path, okay, this is like all the libraries which are present in the class path. You have added MySQL connector jar so that the current project can get the capabilities of MySQL. Okay. Now the next thing and the most important thing that I want everyone to note here is when I share the same project with you, and if you load the project into Eclipse, it will show an error. Why it will show an error? Because in the class path, I am telling it that, hey, go to this specific folder, okay, see users, this one, desktop, and backup, okay, and look for this jar. That is what I am telling. In your system, this location will never be present, right? So it will definitely cause an exception or it will cause an error. I will show you that. Okay, say okay. So now our project, if I go to the referenced libraries, if I expand it, did you notice here? I can say that the current project is referencing an additional jar which is present in this location. Okay. So now if I expand this jar, as I already said, is nothing but a set of or a collection of classes and interfaces. So I stands for interface. These are all interfaces. These are all classes, something like that. Okay. So now let me explain the error which you will see in your system. Okay. So when I share the same program with you, what will happen is let oh, okay, let me do one thing. Let me create a folder called temp and let me move this jar to this location for time being. Okay. So what will happen is when you load your project into your workspace, it will show an error like this. So first thing, go ahead, download a jar file and place it in some folder in your laptop. The next thing that you need to do is right click, go to build path and say configure build path, and then if you go to libraries it will tell, hey, this is not present or this is missing. Did you notice here it shows that is missing? Right now I explicitly removed the jar from that location, so it will be showing missing. And same case with your thing also. So select two things you can do. Either you can click on edit and change the location, or you can say remove and then add an external jar again. Add external jar. Now this time you need to point to the jar where you have downloaded and placed in your machine. So if suppose if you have placed it in this location, make sure that you go ahead and point to that one. Okay. So is everyone clear with how to resolve this error? Why? Because you will definitely see this error when I share this project. Okay. So two things I want you to understand here. The first one is I gave you the website name called mvnrepository.com. Go there, search and download the relevant one, or you can always go to Google and you can start typing like MySQL jar download. You can do that. Okay. So anything you can do. Now once you're done with this, you gave your project the capabilities for connecting to the database. Now let me add or let me explain a few basic concepts with which you can connect to the database and can perform all the CRUD operations, CRUD operations. Now before that, one quick question to all of you. So I do have a project called JDBC in my workspace. Now apart from this JDBC project, can any other projects connect to the database in my workspace? As far as you know, everyone knows. Okay, Sai is telling no. So why Sai? Why I cannot connect? Okay, maybe library should be updated. Very good, Sai. That's that good answer. That's good answer. So the first question is, how did the JDBC project get the capabilities for connecting to the database? The first question, how did it get those capabilities? What is the answer, team? very good. Since we added this additional jar, okay, since we added this additional jar which can help us in connecting to the database, okay, so the current JDBC project, okay, the current JDBC project can connect to the database with the help of this jar. And till date we never added this jar in any of the projects that we have already present in our Eclipse. So at present none of the projects other than JDBC project can connect to the database. Okay, so if you add this jar to other projects also, then you can view the capabilities of connecting to the database to other projects also. Clear? Okay, good. Now the next question. In our previous project, JSP project, can someone tell me how can I give that JSP project capabilities to connect to the database? Why? Because till now we are using a hash map only. So the answer is we can just add the MySQL jar to the JSP project also. And the answer to your question, Atif, like this is for MySQL only. Yes, that's correct. Observe the naming pattern for this jar. It is saying that MySQL hyphen connector hyphen Java. It can connect MySQL and Java. It acts as a bridge between two different unknown entities. Okay, you want to cross a river from one end to the other end, so they are not connected with each other. So you can have a bridge, you can construct a bridge which can help you in going from location A to the location B and from location B to location A. The same way you can use this jar to connect between the Java application and MySQL. Okay, now let me create a basic class so that I can connect to the database, talk to the database. So I say new package, and here I say com dot easylearn java dot util. Okay, I have created a package called com dot easylearn java dot util, and in this one, the first thing that I am going to explain here is like create a base class where I can establish a connection with the database. New class, I can say DB connection from Java. I created a class, and in here I will be going to write a certain set of standard logics. Okay, so whatever I write here is all like a common set of code that we use across for connecting to the database. So let me go ahead and code certain statements and then come back and explain. Connection, so connection object, so I say control shift O to import that connection. So it is from java.sql.connections. As I already said, we will be using a predefined package in Java. Okay, java.sql is a package. Then I say private string, private string URL for connecting the database. Private string username. I can always go ahead and hard code the values like the username, password, everything. I can go ahead and hard code. But in this scenario, I'm not going to hard code any of them. Why? Because I want to make sure that I can make this as much configurable as possible. Means every time I want to change some parameters, I need not come to a Java code and change. I want to write it in a different way, like I will write it in a properties file, so that anytime I want to change any of the properties, I will not touch my Java code anywhere. I will go to the properties file and change the parameters. So you will understand this shortly once I complete this coding. Okay, so now I write something called as, so in general, till date, whatever we saw is like whenever we write a method, there is a return type for that method. The return type would be like either a string or an int, excuse me, or a void or something like that we used to write, right? So now I want to give back a connection object to anyone who calls this. Okay, so maybe let me write some code which it will make some more sense for you. Get db connection. I wrote a method on here. I say try catch section e dot print stack trace. Okay, now let me go back and create an something called as a properties file. Okay, so if you understand like what I'm trying to explain here, the properties file will help me in easy configuration purpose. So under src I will say new title the text file, some file I will say, and I will first try to store it in the JDBC project under src, and I will name it as db parameters dot properties file. Okay, so in this properties file I will define all the set of properties that I want to use for connecting to the database. db underscore driver equal to com dot mysql dot jdbc dot driver. And if you wonder like what exactly is this I wrote here, this is nothing but a package structure com.mysql.jdbc. If I expand this one, do you see here com.mysql.jdbc, and there is a class called driver inside this one. So if I scroll down, see here there is a class called driver. So we will be using a pre-defined class called driver for connecting to the database. Okay, we'll take the help of that class. So that is the driver class which will help us in the connection. And then the next thing is the URL, like a local host, HTTP localhost 8080 and all these things, which will help us in coming to our database, right? Sorry, to our application server. So if I say I do have a Tomcat in Eclipse, which is running at a port 8080, if I want to send a request onto that Tomcat, I will say HTTP colon localhost 8080. The same way, if I want to send some data or some requests onto the MySQL server, there is again a URL which is predefined for it. URL equal to JDBC colon MySQL colon slash slash localhost colon 3306, and like 8080 3306 is the standard port, and this is the schema name Athena. Okay, then db underscore user equal to root db underscore password equal to password. The password is password. Now the first and the foremost thing that I did here is I wrote all the configuration parameters inside a properties file, so that at any point of time if I want to change the password to password 123 or password abc or something, I can come to this file and I can change it, so that I need not touch my Java code. Okay, now the next thing, in this context the first scenario that I would like to explain here is I want these parameters, okay, driver, URL, username and password. For these parameters I want to assign some values which are present in this properties file. So how do I read a dot properties file and get all the parameters present here? That is where we use one more predefined class called as resource bundle defined in Java. Okay, resource bundle. So this resource bundle, what exactly the resource bundle does is it can read a dot properties file for you. Resource bundle rs equal to resource bundle dot get bundle and give the file name. The file name is db parameters, db parameters, and always make sure that don't append dot properties here. By default, the resource bundle will go ahead and look for the db parameters dot properties file in your class path. Okay, under that src folder it will look for that. So never ever give dot properties extension there. Now, why did we use a resource bundle? Because the resource bundle has the capability to read this properties file and give you some values. Now, if you understand the dot properties file, there are two things which you will understand here. db underscore driver is a kind of a key and the value for this is the highlighted part. Okay, so the highlighted part is the value for this key, and for db URL the next one, the same way db user. So this is nothing but a key value pair. Okay, this is like a key value pair. Now the next thing that you need to do here is at any point of time, if I say like, hey, assign me or get me a value for this key, so db underscore driver, then you need to tell the resource bundle that go ahead and read a key. So for that, what I do is I want to get this driver. The driver value is nothing but resource bundle rs dot get string, get me a string called db underscore driver and assign it to the driver which is present in my class. So the resource bundle goes to the properties file, reads this specific key and gets the value for that and assigns it to this one. Okay, is that clear to everyone, like what is happening? Adit, Bhargavi, Padma, Praveen, Sai, Sandeep, Siddharth, everyone. Okay, very good. Now the next one you need is the URL. URL equal to again rs dot get string of db underscore URL. Then username equal to rs dot get string of db underscore username. Okay. Password equal to rs dot get string of db underscore password. Okay, so once we get all the parameters, now we are ready to connect to the database. So again, the next set of statements that I write are some common set of statements. I say like class dot per name and I say the driver. So this is one of the most important things that you need to understand at line number 24. So what exactly I'm doing at class dot per name and passing a driver. So when I pass a driver, what is the value that I'm passing? It is nothing but the value for db underscore driver in this properties file, which is nothing but the com.mysql.jdbc.driver. So the com.mysql.jdbc.driver is nothing but a class which is present in this package in the jar file that I have added. So at any point of time, all you need to do is invoke this driver class first. So if you go back and understand the concept of creating an object, like if you have a student class, you say student as equal to new student, which means you're trying to create an object for a student, right? So in that scenario, creating an object for a student is nothing but just you're trying to invoke a student object, and means if you understand the basic scenario there, you are trying to create an object using the new keyword, right? Now, the second scenario at line number 24 is nothing but you are trying to invoke a class which is already given to you. So, you have, if suppose if you have a class called student, you can say class dot for name com dot easylearnjava dot abc dot student. Like that, you can give the package here, which means the difference between line number 24 and 20, the previous scenario is, in the previous scenario, we are using a new keyword to create an object, and in this context at line number 24, we are trying to invoke a class during runtime using the class dot for name concept. Okay, so both are like creating objects. So at line number 24, you're trying to invoke the driver class. The next thing, CONN, which is nothing but defined at line number 8, connection object equal to, you have the driver the first thing you need to understand here is whatever classes which we are using here, they are used to establish a connection to the database. Then from once we establish a connection, we can use some other things like classes, some other interfaces like statement, prepared statement, and all those things to send data to the database. So here we are just establishing a connection. We are just trying to create a bridge between two places across a river. Okay, so CONN connection equal to, how I say, the driver manager, again a predefined class. Driver manager, if you see at line number 4, it has imported the driver manager class. The driver manager dot get connection, and in this connection I will pass the URL and the username and password. Okay, so now once the connection object is created, you will return back the connection object to whoever is calling. Okay, so the first and the foremost thing that you need to understand here is what did we do in this class, or in this class and in this specific method. In this method, we are creating a bridge between Java and the MySQL, and if you see here, I'm returning back the connection. So I'm returning back an instance of that connection to anyone who is trying to call, so that I can give that connection to them so that they can connect to the database from there or using that. Okay, clear till this point to everyone? Any doubts? Any questions? Okay, okay, that's good. So the next thing that I'm going to explain here is a simple insert statement, which will insert some data into the database. And one more thing, team, like as I already said, like this SQL, we will be writing some queries which can be filed or which can be applied on a database to perform some operations that we discussed, like create, read, update, delete operations. Okay, so this is nothing but we will be writing queries in a specific language called SQL, structured query language. Okay, so you are trying to write a language, or you're trying to write something which can do a query and get some output for you, like, or can perform some CRUD operations. So I prefer, like, those of you who are not aware of SQL, or those of you who already have some understanding of SQL, still everyone please go to the W3 schools and go to the tutorial called SQL, and make sure that you go back and read some concepts back in that SQL. Okay, so let me write a simple class here. So the class I say is insert. Okay, this is basically used, this class is used for inserting data into the database. So I already have a table. I will give all those. Yeah, okay, Adit. So I will give all these SQLs and all to everyone. But what I want every one of you to do is, like, for today, just follow the class. So once we are done, maybe I can give you all the SQL statements, so that you can create, or you can run those SQL statements and can get the same old data in your machines, so that it can be ready for you to use. Okay. So then now the first question. From this class, I want to connect to the database. Okay, now I need a connection to connect to the database. Now my question is, how can this current class called insert get the connection? From where exactly it can get the database connection? Very good, Sai. So the answer is, it can go to this DB connection from Java class. Okay, it can go to this class, and in this class it can ask this method, hey, give me a connection. Okay, it can ask that, hey, give me a connection, so that it can get a connection object to connect to the database. So if it has a connection object, it can go back and connect to the database. So the first thing that I will do here is, I will create an object for this class, like a main method, db connection from Java. So db connection equal to new db connection from Java. Okay, so once I get that, the next thing that I will write here is some connection equal to null, control shift o, import.java.sql.connection, and then statement stm. I will tell you what is the statement. Java.sql.statement. So all I'm trying to import is from java.sql package. Now here what I say is, right, exception key dot print stack trace. Okay, now see, so the first thing that I will try to do here is, I do have an object for this class called db connection from Java. Okay, I do have an object for this class. Now my question to everyone, with this object, okay, understand my question and answer to that. With that object DBC, can I connect to database? Everyone, I want an answer from everyone. Okay, so I'm trying to reiterate the same old question. So understand what is that I'm having here. I do have an object called DB connection from Java class object only I have here. So with that database connection from Java, can I connect to the database? Is my question. So why no, Krishna? Okay, the answer is wrong. So understand here thing. Uh, I will add, or I will explain a simple scenario. Yeah, the question here is a sim I'm just reiterating the question in a different way with a different example. Okay, understand the question. I do have a class called student, and in that student class I have a method called get student grade. Okay, get student grade. Now if I call the get student grade, then only I can get the actual output of the student, like what is the grade of that student. Okay, now my question is, if I just have a student object, okay, if I just have a student object, can I get the grade out of it, or do I need to call the grade method on that object to get the grade? Exactly. We need to call, no. It's not the case of extending. We will never ever extend. Okay. So extending is a different concept. So when I say we will never ever extend, so let me reiterate the point here. Extending is something which we will do when we have a common set of features which are defined in a specific location. Okay, so in real time, if you go, we will not extend from this DB connection from Java. We will extend from some other classes, which we will discuss later. But in this context, I am not going to extend. I just created an object for this DBC, and now the next thing that I'm trying to do here is, see, yeah, excellent, Sai. So what I do is connection equal to DBC dot get DB connection. Okay, now what is line number 15 doing? Line number 15 is going to this class, calling this get DB connection, will perform all these actions and will return a connection object back to insert.java and will place into this connection object. So using this object, now you can connect to database. Is it clear to everyone, like what is the use of line number 15, right? So without writing line number 15, you can never ever connect to the database. Why? Because at line number 15, so it's something like there are two classes, insert.java and db connection from java.java. So this db connection from Java, it has a master key to enter into a different, if you want to enter into your house, it has your master key. So when you come like insert.java, can you enter your house unless you get the master key? You cannot, right? The same way, this class has a method which can give you a connection object which can help you to connect to the database. So until and unless you call this method, you will never get that connection object. If you once you get the connection object, that is when you can connect to the database. Okay, can I take it granted that everyone understood till this point? Okay, awesome. Now the next step. The next step is something called as the statement. The statement, if you see in Java, like there are three different things that you see: statement, prepared statement, and callable statement. We will understand one at a time. So the first one is statement. A statement is an interface in Java which will help us in connecting to the database. Okay, so now, sorry, it's not helping us in connecting to the database. So whatever query that I want to write will be given to this statement object, so that the statement object can take it to the database and execute it for me. Okay, so I say here stmt statement equal to connection dot create statement. It will create a statement object for us. Okay, so that once the statement object is created, I can use that statement object. So I can say statement dot execute. mm, yeah, I do have execute. So statement dot execute, and here I will write the actual SQL statement. So SQL, the structured query language, whatever I said, like all the basic concepts are very easy, simple and straightforward. So the first thing that I want to do here is insert some data into the database. Okay, so see here what I do. So for inserting some data, the SQL query will look like this. It is insert. For inserting, insert into what you want to insert. My basic criteria is to insert into this table, and the table name is user. Okay, so excuse me, where do you want to insert? See, the SQL that I'm trying to write is case insensitive. Okay, it is case insensitive, so don't assume that since I'm writing in all caps you also need to write in all caps. It's nothing like that. You can write SQL in either caps or small letters, anything. So insert into user table. Okay, insert into user. So you want to insert into user tables. What are the values that you want to insert? So insert into user values. So there are three things that you need to enter: user ID, username, password. So the user ID is 4 and the username is, let's say, Prasad. And see here, the first one is int and the next two are string kind of concepts. Okay, so what I do here is this username is nothing but a string and the password is again a string. So I say username Prasad, ID, username, and the password. The password is something but password, no secret. Okay, and I close the bracket. I open the bracket and close it. So did you notice here what did I do? I wrote a simple SQL statement: insert into user table the values in the bracket for Prasad, no secret. This is what I'm trying to insert. Okay, now, and the most important thing always you need to do is, like, once you are done with using them, you need to close the statement and you need to close the connection object. Connection dot close. Okay, so now let me do one thing. Let me execute this one by one. Okay, let me put a debug point and execute this line by line and explain what is happening. So it starts executing this main method. So in the main method, first what I did is, like, I tried to create an object for the DB connection from Java class. So yeah, values is a predefined one. Okay, that's a part of a query. So I say next, next, next. At line number 15, I would like to go into that method. So at this line number 15, it will call the actual method. So go into that one. So the first one, resource bundle rs equal to resource bundle get bundle and all. So it, the resource bundle has read the DB parameters file, and now from this, first let me give the driver. So what is the driver initially? If you see the driver is null. Now if I execute that, did you notice here when I hover my mouse on the driver, now the driver, which is the property in this class, shows com.mysql.jdbc.driver, which is configured in the properties file. Okay, so the resource bundle is a class which can read the properties file and get the key value pairs for us, the value for a specific key. The same way I'm passing the URL, username and password. Oh, okay, something went wrong. Okay, what is this? He cannot find resource db underscore username. He cannot find it shows. Oh, okay, sorry. I wrote db underscore user and the name here is db underscore username. Okay, db underscore user. Okay, let me go back and rerun it once again. Debug. Go here, go here, go here. Go into this method. Now execute this. Good. This is good. This is good. This is good. So now I got everything. Now I'm trying to invoke the class, create a connection, okay, and then give back this connection to the caller. So I got a connection object which can connect to the database which I have specified in these properties. Now it went to the statement object, it created the statement object. So what is that I want to do? I want to insert something. So before I execute line number 18, let me go back to the database and run this query once again. If I run this query, okay, click this. See, it has only 3 records now. Okay, so now let me go back to the Java class and execute line number 18, then close line number 20, 21, and then complete the execution. Okay, completed the execution. Now if I go back and execute the same old statement once again, did you notice here I am able to insert some data like for Prasad no secret into the database from the Java application. Okay, so this is out of the CRUD operations. We are able to read something from sorry, not read, create. We are able to create or insert some data into the database from the Java application. So is that clear, like what we did? Okay, that's good. So